Barbara Elaine Smith, known to the world as B. Smith, was an amazing woman. She was a restaurateur, she was a model, she was a talk show host, and a lifestyle expert. And that's perhaps what she's known most for. She gave Black women for the first time a picture of not only elegance and beauty, because that was already out there, but she also gave them a picture of what that looked like combined with business ownership and living beautifully. I'm honored to bring you her story today. It is fascinating and tragic at the same time. I'm Lady TrenettWilson, your social historian and lecturer. I want to thank you for joining me for another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. And if this is your first time, welcome. And I want to say thank you, Royalists, for your dedication. Everybody hit that like button, like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's get into our lecture. Barbara passed, and before she passed, she announced that she had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She wanted to take her dedicated fans on her journey from where she began when she was diagnosed to when she passed. But today I want to spend some time on her life. She was a phenomenal woman. I never want us to forget, where things started so that we can keep the tradition going. And she really, really set the course for etiquette consultants, women who are in fashion, women who are in business ownership. Just phenomenal. Now, B was born on August the 24th, 1949 in Everson, Pennsylvania. My mom's birthday, August 24th. Now, Everson was in a suburb of Vicksburg. Her mom was a maid and her name was Florence, and her father, William, was a steel worker. B had two brothers, one named Ronald and one named Dennis. Couldn't find a lot of information about them, but they mentioned them as survivors after her passing. So those were her two brothers. Smith was raised in Scottsdale, Pennsylvania, so they moved from where they originally lived, where she graduated from Southmoreland High School in 1967. She was making moves before some of us was even born. In high school, B wanted to belong to something called the Future Homemakers of America. Back in the day, they used to have homemaking class. And they had a group of people who were homemakers who had a program called the Future Homemakers of America. And they don't have that anymore. And that's just really sad. I think that's why you see the decline in homemaking amongst young women now. So they don't keep their rooms clean. They don't keep their homes clean. They don't know how to cook. So B really wanted to be a part of this organization. Unfortunately, back in 1967, however, discrimination was still alive and they would not let her join. No problem though. B said, okay, I'll start my own. And she did. She started her own Future Black Homemakers of America, and she became the president. Her leadership skill was coming out early, and it would permeate throughout the rest of her life. By the mid 60s, B started modeling. She was tall, she was elegant, and very beautiful woman. So she modeled in the Ebony Fashion Fair, which was run by Eunice Johnson and the co-owner of the Ebony and Jet magazine. So if you're from back in the day, you know all about Ebony and Jet. You know what? I'm going to do a video on her. Her life is so interesting. And she's also in my book, Royal, Black, and Elite. Make sure you pick it up from Amazon. And thank you to all of those who have already gone out and purchased it. I left the link down below if you want to look at that. Her exposure, it led to her getting signed with the Wilhelmina Modeling Agency, which was a really big modeling agency. So congratulations at that time to her, because that was quite an accomplishment. She was on the cover in 1976 of Mademoiselle. So she was doing really well. She was even on Mr. Rogers. So in 1986, she married former HBO executive Donald Don Anderson, and they were married for about 4 years. But the marriage that she's known most for, and the man who walked with her throughout most of her entire career, not all of it though, she had built a lot before they were married. His name was Dan Gadsby. And they met in 86 when she was at her restaurant and when she was just getting divorced from her first husband. And they dated for about 6 years and married in 1992. Gatsby was a producer of the Essence Awards and the VP of marketing for Camelot Entertainment Sales Incorporated. B did not have any children during their marriage or with her first marriage, but Dan had a daughter named Dana and she raised her. So in 1997, B had her own talk show called B. Smith Would Smile. I can remember watching that television show. B also owned multiple restaurants. The first one opened in 1986 and eventually moved around onto Restaurant Row. And shortly after, this was in New York, shortly after she opened one in Sag Harbor in Long Island, New York. And she also had a restaurant in DC in Union Station. And these restaurants stayed open for many years and didn't begin to close until between 2013 and 2015. And she was diagnosed with the early onset Alzheimer's in 2014. So I'm thinking she probably closed them because of her diagnosis. She couldn't keep them going by herself. And she was really kind of, other than Dana being there and helping her and her husband at least physically being there to help her, this is where it really gets sad and the tragedy begins. Her height, you could find these products at Bed Bath and Beyond. And in 2000, which she launched in 2001. And in the spring of 2010, she launched a furniture collection with Lazy Boy. She was a boss in every sense of the word. I don't know when she slept. She wrote books on decorating, entertaining, and cooking. However, like I said, at the height in 2014, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Her husband reported her missing. Though she lived in Southampton, New York, they didn't find her until a day later in in the middle of Manhattan. And I think she was probably going to look for her restaurant. This story, to see this woman who was so beautiful, so smart, and just had a wonderful career, she really kind of went down pretty quickly. During her illness, her husband was criticized, however, because he brought in this woman here, Alexandra Lerner. And her whole purpose, I thought, was for her to take care of me. However, later on, we found out that he and Alexandra were in a relationship and they were taking B out looking like this. Here he is cooking with B and B standing over here with this lady and B is standing in the corner. I'm sure she did not like what she was seeing. But because she was a prisoner in her own mind, there was nothing that she could do. Now, Dan said reportedly that he wanted him to move on. This is what she wanted. This made her happy to see him happy with another woman. Wives, are any of you married out there? Would you be okay with your husband, who you've been married to almost 30 years, taking up with a woman in front of you while you were on the last months, days, or years of your life? How about you, husbands? How would you like it if a woman, your beautiful wife, who'd been with you for 30 years, brought in a man on your sick bed, strong and strapping, helping her pick the greens and stuff? I don't think that would go too well. And it didn't go well in the public. Now, Dan, again, he said everything was cool. Nobody had a problem with it except the public. And they were together there to help, to help B get through this hard time in her life. I call BS. And this story upset me so bad by the end because she passed. She did. She passed peacefully on February the 22nd, 2020, at the age of 70. Now, shortly afterwards, however, maybe like a year or so, Dan said, Alexandra took off. She just left him. I wonder why. At the time of her passing, B was worth $20 million. So all of the businesses that she had did well enough to keep her comfortable as, throughout her illness. And I'm sure old Dan is living off the money today. So that's the story of B. Smith, my mentor, a woman who I greatly respected. And to see how she moved from being a model to into the restaurant business, into a television show, into a lifestyle show. She was truly, and I don't want to call her the Black Martha Stewart. I want to call her B. Smith, phenomenal woman. So I thank you for joining me for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot. And I'll see you on another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And comment, do you remember B. Smith? Her products are no longer available, but you can still get her books on Amazon. She was in Target for a while as well. I thank you all for watching.